Hi gang, Scott Davenport here. Welcome to In Post and thanks for joining me today. Today's a photo teardown, a photo I shared on a different video about assessing your image before editing it. Got several questions, some in the comments on video, some through email, about what did you do to process this photo? I did a very deep black and white treatment on a seascape that was taken kind of on a hazy-ish day, midday, not a lot of color going on. So I thought I'd do a photo teardown where I show the major processing steps to get the look that I ended up with. Now, normally when I do these types of videos, I'll have a few snapshots in Lightroom and just show the major steps and kind of the iterative highlights of where I ended up along the process. Today I'm going to try something a little different and just show you the raw history of the photo in Lightroom. And the reason for that is to show that there's a lot that will go on between major steps, a lot of trial and error, tweaking of brush strokes and whatnot. So here's the final photo in Lightroom, and let me open up the side panel and take a look at the history. And there are, tons and tons and tons of steps here trying different things. You'll see lots of different brush strokes being added, radial filters being adjusted. There's many different small adjustments that add up to the final result. But let's just highlight a few of the things here. Here's the bottom of this, right? The original photo as it came in out of camera. And as I said, it's kind of overcast. There's not a lot of color in the scene to begin with. And that pretty quickly made me decide I want to do a black and white photo. But here, spot removal. Okay, we're changing things. We're addressing some of the deltas, or the sensor dust, or getting rid of items like trees that didn't add to my story. Like a couple of things up along this ridge line will disappear. And then get into the profile choices. And it's interesting, although this says Adobe Color when I select it, I know I was using a different filter, a black and white filter, but I settled on black and white number 1 as like my baseline. That felt pretty good. And from here, I started doing the actual adjustments to the normal things, exposure and contrast and so forth. So the profile was selected, and then it was time to just work the basics of the sliders here. And so we can see I got it to dehaze and made some adjustments, really already going in a very contrasty type look. Almost high key, not to the degree of completely blowing out whites and making them totally soft, but a very deep, rich black and white. Next was doing some tone curve work and just refining that. And notice there's some more detail that's showing up in the white area. So this is a variation of an S curve, still brightening up the upper midtones to highlights, kind of keeping the midtones in check and opening up the shadows a little bit. From here, we got into a variety of different exposure adjustments, and these, it's going to be hard for me to pick out individual spots, but let's go up to where we have, let's say before the radial filter, we'll go up to the exposure adjustment here. So we're going to see some shifts up in the sky. Notice here's the tone curve, and the sky is kind of a bit, it's dingy. There's some hints of clouds out here, but then adding a gradient, adjusting the range mask so I'm only hitting the upper parts of the sky. That part of it I went completely high key, just took it to a very bright value, just shy of blowing out. There's no real important detail out there, and that negative space really helps reinforce the darker rocks that I have in the center of the scene. From here, radial filters, these got used to target particular rocks, and there are a bunch of them throughout the entire processing session here. Let's take a look at one of them where, from adding the radial filter to adjusting all of the sliders, that was this center rock here. Notice that popped up more. We'll take a look at that again. Before, and then after. And notice there was a bit of a shift there because there's this invert mask. You may have noticed what looked like the disappearance of a vignette. By default, when you put a radial filter on the scene in Lightroom, it's affecting things on the outer edge of that. And I think the last adjustment I must have done the last time I used a radial filter was something with exposure. So the outside got darker and that got cleaned up through the adjustments. Here on in, so many different brush strokes. I'm going to be hard pressed to guess exactly where these were landing, but I do know we're doing things in the regions of making sure I get my rocks more separated. I mentioned that in the video I talked about assessing the photo. Separation there. Ultimately, I want to get a little more detail in the whites of the nice foam swirling around in the surf. And let's just pick a spot here, perhaps before we get to duplicating more adjustments. Let's get to the brush strokes. So that was right up in this area there, where we took that rock and brightened it up, darkened up a foreground a little bit, just to get more separation of those elements. Many more radial filters, and each one of these was like hitting a particular rock. Did some work on this one, did some work on this one. I believe I did some work on this one as well. So let's get all the way up to maybe here. And notice those rock faces, particularly the ones that are facing toward my light source. The sun still high in the sky, but generally in the upper right portion of the frame. Let me do that one more time. Let's go back down to here. Now watch this rock, and this rock. These segments in particular, a little bit more out here as well, as we do the the radial filters. Those are brightening up. So this is a form of dodging and burning, just adjusting certain sides of the photo or the subjects. Continuations of a theme, lots and lots of that. Finally got into vignetting. So really darkening the edges. Revisited many of the radial filters to just tidy things up and make them just fine-tuning things. Also did a crop. You can see that crop jump in there. And then the very last bit, I had to back off a little bit on the black clipping. I was having a little bit too deep of the shadows in these corners here. So when I turned on clipping, that stuff was disappearing. So that's the fundamental steps. But it's at a high level, it's pretty basic things. A lot of dodging and burning, really. But it was attention to detail, and the image assessment really helped with that. So I hope you found that useful. I hope you enjoyed the video. And my name is Scott Davenport. You got any questions about photography, hit me up either in the comments or through my website. And until next time, happy shooting.